Cool.
So, welcome, Alex, to the Good Girl Unleashed podcast. As I was mentioning to you just before, I was recommended to your podcast by a friend, and I've just been loving like being in your world and really listening to some of your episodes have really resonated. One of my previous episodes, The Death of Quick Fixes, was inspired by your episode. And so it's just, yeah, when I received your email around the good girl conditioning and the programming, I was just like, holy shit, like this is so potent, and I resonated with it so much. And I actually just got this intuitive hit, like reach out to Alex and see if she wants to come onto the podcast. So I'm really excited to have you here. I'm just going to hand over to you if you'd like to just introduce yourself and share a little bit about this good girl conditioning and these programs that we're going to go into today and your journey with that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for asking me to be on your podcast. When I got your email, I was like, okay, I'll check out what's the podcast and a Good Girl Unleashed. And I was like, okay, this is obviously going to be perfect. So yes, hi everyone. I'm Alex Harvey, and I am a coach for women, and I help women live their true nature and purpose. And what that's really about is connecting with and understanding who they truly are, in their essence, not their who they've learned to be, not their conditioning, not who you believe you need to be viable in the world, but who you truly are and what you would love to share with the world, the life that you would authentically love to live from your heart. So it's helping women uncover what that is and to create that and overcome their self-limiting beliefs about themselves, beliefs about the world, beliefs about others, so that they can live the full expression of that. And in that, tap into their natural ability and genius that knows how to do that, that knows how to create what it is that they want in life, rather than, overthinking, seeking answers outside yourself, and struggling against the forces that oppose you in life. So that's what I'm about in my work, and there's a couple of different ways that I do that. I have programs, and what I've learned over the years in coaching, I've been coaching for about 10 years now, is that there's these particular hotspot areas as well that women have been particularly disempowered in. And so addressing those is such a power source for women. So, for example, things like money, sexuality, helping women connect with their power in those areas as well. So, I do have some work that really specifically covers those areas. And then to speak to good girl conditioning, this is something that's been rattling around in my brain, I would say, for a couple of years now. I coach a lot of women one-to-one, and there are these very consistent themes that come up of where they feel blocked. Very consistent themes around not having permission, not being able to step into their power, not being worthy or allowed to have what they want based on their body shape, or their weight or their appearance. Just these consistent themes. That's this conditioning that women have received, and some of the stuff relates to men as well, but men and women grow up actually in a very different context. When I grew up, I like probably most other people, I did history classes, and I didn't see people that were the same as me, aka women, in those roles of power. So I don't automatically associate myself as no different from those people, right? And so there's all these maybe seemingly subtle ways that we actually grow up in a very different context, and it's only really in the last 100 years that the role of women in society has changed so rapidly. Women were a man's property before that, and they didn't have sovereignty in so many different ways. They didn't have their own money. It's just my grandma's generation. that she had two options of study, teaching or nursing. She did teaching. And then once she was married, she couldn't work as a teacher anymore. And actually, her husband got cancer about 2 years into their marriage, and she had to work at a hardware store to support them because she couldn't work as a teacher because she was married. This is only my grandmother. My grandmother raised my mother. Like what unconscious messages do you think she put on my mother? And although my mother grew up more empowered than my grandmother, it still lingers on. So there's definitely this conditioning that women are in particular subject to. And I think a really fitting word for it is the good girl conditioning, because it's really about being good. You have to be good, be pleasing, be nice, line up in all these ways, be perfect, be good. And it's something that women generally find like really hard to break out of because it is our conditioning. So as I was saying, this has sort of been rattling around in my brain for a little while, and I've been wanting to create a podcast episode on it or write some content on it. And it just hadn't quite been coming to me what it is. And then I just ran a retreat in Bali a few weeks ago, my Creatrix retreat. And it just came to me then, okay, there's a section on good girl conditioning. And then as I was putting together that section, it just came, I wanted to sort of isolate these particular flavors in which it comes out. And so that's what happened. And these 10 good girl conditioning programs came out of that really describe these certain, I'm calling them programs, like programs we have running that are driven by something we're validated for, or if we don't line up with that, we're judged and rejected for. So that's a little bit of background on what they are.
Yeah, thank you. It's so fascinating just as you're sharing like the kind of pieces that are bubbling up for me, like even just the piece on your grandmother and mother, and I'm like reflecting on mine, and I know how my mum just she was doing everything to step into becoming like an actress, and she wanted to do theater, and then as soon as she was married she wasn't allowed to do that, and so all of this work, and she was paying for her own classes, she was like getting her own way there from a very young age, and then she got married at 17, she was pregnant, and that just got canned. And then she married my dad, and it still wasn't okay. And now she's in her 50s and she still feels like it's not okay. And I'm like, Mom, you got to get into like a theater or a community group. Like, you got to do what you want to do. And it's just like, it's your time, Mom. And it's like, oh, like, I don't know. Like, how would it feel if you stepped into the theater? Oh, that would be exciting, she says. And I'm like, go for it. Like, I'm giving you the permission that obviously it's not really up to me. Like, she's got to give that permission to herself, but it's like, do it. Like, and I can just see how that has been like such a piece that's shut down for her of like what it means to be a good wife or a good mother or a good this. And I noticed when I became a mother, I actually felt this kind of energy sink onto my shoulders around like it's not okay for me to be sexual anymore. It's not okay for me to be the rebel and the like kind of for my early 20s and I was just partying and doing whatever the fuck I wanted. And I was like, it's not okay anymore. It's not okay to swear anymore. And I would like, I noticed how I wouldn't say fuck anymore. And it was just like, that's bad. That's bad. And I would just come into this little box, even in business. Oh, now I'm a businesswoman. I have to be professional and I can't do X, Y, and Z. And it's so funny connecting with a good friend of mine, and she's like, "Oh, I'm seeing how you're still trying to like be professional." I'm like, "I know." And it's just like that layer by layer, breaking free. And that's really what the Good Girl Unleash is about. It's like, let's just unleash ourselves from all of this conditioning. But again, it's like layer by layer, like I'm still noticing. Even going through your email of like, oh yeah, I can resonate with probably all of them and see where I'm still in that and how much I've also broken out of it and the freedom that I feel, but also the work that's still here for me. And that actually feels really exciting. And what I really loved by actually being able to, like you're saying, isolate these flavors, it's like, oh yeah, now I can actually really connect to that flavor and see where it's showing up. And then, like, through that awareness, I can actually do the work to shift it.
Yeah, totally. And, I think that's a really great point that you shared of stepping into these different roles what unconscious definitions that has for you, that identity that you know, unconsciously want to assume, like becoming a mother. Okay, I need to be like this, and now I can't swear and I can't be sexual. And then the role of being a business owner. And I completely resonate with that. When I first started in my coaching journey, the I first started very briefly with just like life coaching. And then very quickly it became coaching around sexuality because that was a big area that I sought my own transformation in and then did a lot of study in and then was really passionate about sharing. And that, you know, I was able to lean into that for a while and really, you know, go for that and do that. And then long story that I won't get into here. I quit coaching for a while. And when I came back to coaching, so I think I stopped coaching for close to a year, let's say. When I came back to it, the next thing that I was really like hot on that I'd done a lot of study and transformation around was money. And so I was building my coaching business around supporting women to change their relationship with money. And in particular, you know, when they're setting their own prices and having an inconsistent income, which you would have if you're self-employed. And, you know, once I started to build that business, I guess in my sexuality business, I was more just in a world of more alternative people. And when I was building this coaching business, I was living in Melbourne. I was going to networking events with, let's say, I would say still quite regular mainstream people. And I was building this business that was about the topic, you know, on the topic of money. And that that came with a whole bunch of definitions for me that's similar. I couldn't be sexual. I couldn't you know, I couldn't behave in certain ways. I needed to maintain my credibility. You know, a really massive one for me to break through has been that if I expose and show myself as a sexual being, which is not that I'm being overtly sexual online, you know, I'm not even like posting, you know, like sexual photos or anything, but just expose that I'm a sexual being and bring in kind of my like sassiness, or maybe I make sexual references and things like that, then people won't see me as having any intellectual ability or credibility anymore. Like it'll destroy my credibility and people will just think that I'm, I don't know, completely like unintelligent and have no value to share. So it's really interesting, those things that come up as we step into different areas and then what that can trigger, or a different level of exposure, you know, or a different, maybe branch out into a different audience. And then what that can bring up and how you can start limiting yourself. You know, no one's doing it to you. You're doing it yourself.
Mm. Yeah, it's so fascinating with sexuality. Like it's been a massive part of my journey for the longest time. Like I've shared this before. Like I remember being so shut down sexually from such a young age, and I can't even pinpoint necessarily when it began, but it was just like always there. And when I had my first boyfriend and I was thinking about like having sex for the first time, I couldn't even relax enough for like that to even be possible. And I remember being like going to the doctor with my mum and getting prescribed Valium at 16 so I could have sex. And it was like it didn't even work. It didn't even, it gave me a great night's sleep, but it was like my body was just like, so this is not okay. So much shame and fear around sex. And then when I did lose my virginity, it just hurt like every time for a year. And then it was just such a massive journey for me in not only being able to have a a relationship with my own sexuality, but to actually feel pleasure, actually to move out of a space of this shutdown and numbness, and then like a whole nother level to actually talk about that journey and be like, this is what I experienced. And now also similar, like weaving it into my work, like how do we use sexual practices and pleasure to actually heal and transform and come into our authenticity and our power, like, oh, it's just a crazy, crazy journey. And going through, yeah, some of these programs, are like, yeah, this makes so much sense why I was just so shut down and so afraid of sexuality. Mm.
Yeah, something that I learned in my sexuality journey as well is that you don't have to have had a terrible physical sexual trauma to have sexual shutdown and for your body to be completely shut down sexually. And it's actually a very common thing to either be very shut down. I was also very shut down in my sexuality, in my body, in my pleasure. I kind of like I mentally wanted to have sex because I wanted to, I don't know, like I kind of self-consciously felt like it was like a beautiful thing to have with someone, and I wanted to be involved maybe in this like more mature thing. Um and yeah, I reached a point where actually my body wouldn't get aroused at all, and so I would be having sex completely non-aroused using lube, and I felt no pleasure as well. And so that was what really drove me. And yeah, what I learned on that journey was, first of all, it took me years to find answers at all,
Mm.
to
Yeah.
actually start making movement on this. And actually initially I was put on antidepressants by my doctor because they were like, oh, well, you must be really depressed, which I mean, I did have depressive issues, I would say, but that wasn't what the sexuality stuff was about. And then just realizing how how your body actually stores well, it stores trauma, but it stores like the messages, and if you constantly get this message that like you're vulnerable, like you're a vulnerable woman, men are out to hurt you, they just want one thing from you, like you like they use you, being
Yeah.
sexual, like just the way that you would hear everyone talk about, the way I would hear my mum talk about Madonna, and like Madonna made a book apparently that had a full spread of her pussy, and what that meant, and it's just this like how bad it was, like how sexual she was. And you take on all of those messages, and then your body just starts closing off, and that can be to any degree, like it's the more extreme degree I would say is that there's no pleasure, there's no arousal, but it can even be that you're just really blocked off from your pleasure and the full spectrum of experiencing your orgasmic nature.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And because I would just go into like complete freeze state. And there's a lot of sexual trauma in like the generational lines in my family. And I know for a lot of people, and just the fear of like, yeah, like if I'm attractive, if I'm seen this way, if this happened, like what's going to happen for me? Like it just felt so unsafe to be in that. And also to be in that full surrendered state. Like for so long, I was just trying to control and hold it all together and like protect myself. Like there was such strong protections in place that was just like, yeah, there was no very little to no arousal. And if I started to get that arousal, it would just get shut down very quickly, like it was there and then it wasn't. And I was like, there's something seriously wrong with me. Like I'm broken, I'm this. And that would just create more shutdown because that's creating these stories. I'm believing those stories. And then not only is it impacting me sexually and in my pleasure, but also in business. I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. I'm broken. So, like, it prevents me from really fully going into putting myself out there in these different ways. Like, similar things in business, similar things in friendships, just really hiding away from the world.
Yeah, I had such a similar experience of feeling, broken just it's only me, at the time it really felt like only me. Now you can find more stuff online about it, but it really felt like only me, an intense shame and then intense hiding. And then there's this pattern of shame and hiding. Like you're saying, that doesn't just then stay in that area. That's something that you carry with you energetically into other areas. Um, and the interesting thing is so many women do experience different levels or degrees of this as well. And everyone, it's just something that's so unspoken about. Um, yeah, there's lots of things that I feel like I could say about this. And something as well that I noticed even when I did have good sexual relationships with my partner, once I sort of broke through it to a certain degree, was like for me, it had to be, my next kind of major breakthrough was around just like being in desire and like being, like sex being allowed to be kind of raunchy and primal and like desire, because I kind of reached this point where I was like, if we treat it as this most beautiful sacred thing, then it's fine, but I remember having a partner once who'd be, maybe message me something about like doing something naughty, and I would have this full on reaction and be like, it's not naughty, it's good, like there's nothing wrong with it. I don't like it when, it's just complete triggered reaction because I just wasn't comfortable with the full spectrum of sexuality and just
Yeah.
owning all of it and all the flavors of it.
Yeah, and even in the language of that, like when we call it, oh, that's naughty, it's like, oh, like, what if it's not even naughty? It's actually just, it's spicy, it's a different flavor, it's a different thing. And it's like these words that we tend to give it, like, even like call it like a bad boy or you bad girl or like whatever. And it's like this messaging that we're constantly receiving of like certain things being wrong, good, bad, negative, positive, and then it just gets kind of put into that box. And yeah, it's just like really strengthening that conditioning and keeping us stuck in that. And I've just been running a masterclass of opening to deeper intimacy, and it's really talking about how this conditioning and these messages and the trauma that we also have around this, how it really stops us from really being intimate with life and having the full experience that we're here to have. And it's not just always about being in the good vibe or in what we consider the good, it's also like experiencing all of it. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that was the other great point you were making was about how tapping into your pleasure, your turn on, your sexual energy in your body is all like these pathways to you and to the essence of you and your full like life force and radiance and being alive and being engaged with life. And one thing that I was came to me earlier that I just wanted to mention was one of the women that came on my retreat that I just ran, where we went through the good girl conditioning. I spoke to her a couple of weeks afterwards, and she said one of the main things that she had gotten from it and that she was working with post the retreat was actually feeling sexy. And, that I feel like to our kind of like cultural conditioned minds, it's kind of like, oh, well, you shouldn't need to feel sexy. Why do you need to feel sexy? Blah, blah, blah. But feeling sexy is like feeling yourself and feeling like you are a radiant being and you are hot shit, you know? And like, if when you're really disconnected from that, it's really hard to be connected to that you are that and not just in the bedroom. Like it's really not just about, like, as you keep mentioning, it's really just not about just within sex with a partner or something. It's about that you like feel that within yourself and you have gifts to share and you are like a vibrant, amazing, incredible human. And then how you go out into life. Like, how do you go out into life feeling really unattractive versus how do you go out into life feeling sexy? It's got nothing to do with wanting to have sex with people. It's like it's feeling yourself, it's vibing, it's being out there and in it. And, like you're mentioning, out in life and connected to life rather than living in a shell of separateness where you're probably living in your head, over analyzing everything and connecting with this and your pleasure and your turn on helps connect you with the flow of life and your genius and your inspiration, your ideas, like your turn on in life, feeling lit up and alive in life.
Yeah, it's so amazing that you bring this up. I just released a podcast on like authentic or embodying your authentic sexiness and how like your sexiness is deeply connected to your authenticity and that's where your magnetism is. So it's like when I'm feeling sexy, I'm feeling like myself, I'm feeling magnetic, like the opportunities that come to me, the people that I meet, the energy that I'm emanating when I'm connecting here with you or having a conversation at a party or whatever it is, like the things that are just attracted to you when you're in that state, like you're magnetic. It's a whole different world compared to like what you say when you're going out, you feel unattractive, you're in your head, you're beating yourself up, you're having all these like horrible thoughts to yourself and pretty much internally beating yourself up and putting yourself down, which impacts your health, impacts your relationships, impacts absolutely everything. Mm.
Yeah, totally. You keep saying things and I have a response and then I've forgotten it by the end of the time you talk, which is really unusual for me. Usually I hold like three things in my brain. But it keeps happening. Oh, I know another thing. Yes, because what you mentioned earlier as well, which I think is a really significant point, is about not just thinking you got to feel good all the time and be in the love and light. And, through through your sexuality and your pleasure, it sounds like this is you work with it this way as well. It's like you can embrace all of it and you can transform like lower, heavy, stuck energies through it. And the way to your full sexual energy and pleasure is through being with it all and meeting it all and all of the uncomfortable stuff. And I find that being connected to like your pleasure and your turn on in life makes you more sensitive and receptive to feeling everything that's there and then being able to move through it, because you can embrace it and be with it. And when you can fully embrace things as they are, including the pain that you experience, then that enables you to move back into your heart and into connection with life and all that is, being able to be with anything if you just really let yourself experience it and don't reject it. Like it can take you back through to joy and back through to bliss. You can be crying, and feeling the depths of your grief. And if you just let yourself feel the depths of your grief, there's something slightly orgasmic and pleasurable about it.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this in. It's just so synchronistic with what like has been moving through me recently. But this just feels like what I'm feeling as you're sharing is like the alchemization process. Like we're alchemizing these energies. And so often we're avoiding certain things and chasing other things. And we kind of end up just in
Mm.
this in between where we're not really feeling much at all. But it's like the full spectrum human experience. Like we're here to experience all of it. And a mentor of mine, she would talk about angergasms and griefgasms and all these things. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, lady? Like, I don't think so. Like, no way. But it was so fascinating that recently I'm leading the embodied woman experience. And that's where I felt guided to call them into like, let's revel and connect to the part that's actually here for this, that is so turned on by the grief, by the disgust, by the jealousy, by the fear, by the failure, like all of it. Because there's part of us that's actually come here to experience this. And when we're avoiding it and pushing it down or distracting, numbing out, it's it actually just numbing the entirety of our experience. We don't get to experience the fullness of our pleasure if we're not willing to experience the fullness of our pain, our grief, our anger. And all of this can actually alchemize. So when you go fully in, that's where you actually get to touch the pleasure and the amount of gifts and wisdom and insights and messages and things that I receive when I really just let myself go into it is freaking mind-blowing. When I really feel and touch the deep grief, the amount that alchemizes and transforms and the amount that it brings me home to myself is absolutely just insane.
Yeah, and that is what it's all about at the end of the day is coming home to yourself and coming home to your heart and your true essence. And what we all have is an egoic structure, an ego that wants to protect us from that, that doesn't believe that who we truly are at our core is viable. So it wants to protect us against that, and it wants to protect us against all of the things that it believes will make us inviable. Like if I'm disgusting, I'll be rejected and inviable. If I'm a failure, I'll be rejected and inviable. And so being able to embrace all of that, and even allow yourself to enjoy it, as you're saying, that's a next step I feel like in really powerfully neutralizing it and feeling the truth of yourself as an all-powerful creator, that you're creating this as you're creating everything else and nothing's wrong or bad, and then that can move you through. As you said, it alchemizes it so that you come home to yourself and who you are. And when you come home to yourself, that's when you're at your most powerful. That's when you are receiving your intuition, because you're not acting out of or you're not listening to the messages of your coping mechanisms and your protective mechanisms. And all of these good girl conditioning programs are protection mechanisms. This is how, okay, you've learned to protect yourself. It's not safe to be sexual or sexy, so I'm going to shut that down to protect myself. It's, I have to like work hard. It has to be hard for it to mean anything. Okay, so that's what I've got to do. That's, because if I'm lazy, if I'm not doing anything, obviously that's going to be really bad. My whole life is going to fall apart. And everyone's taken all of these on to different degrees, right? Some might be really strong for me that aren't that strong for you. And you kind of get like, okay, these are my coping mechanisms. But actually, if I can be with the thing I'm most afraid of, if I can allow the thing I'm most afraid of, if I can allow the pain that I'm avoiding, if I can allow the thing or the part of myself that I'm rejecting, like you're saying, and I can just fully be with that, I can let that exist, I can even like find my turn on in that, then I can pass through it. I can pass through it back into the truth of who I am. And, that's like just an ongoing process. It's not something you do once and it's done forever. You signed off, you like graduated, you now can just live in your heart forever. No, we live with an ego. We live with an ego. Trying to get rid of your ego only strengthens your ego. So you're going to have your ego. You're going to have your protection mechanisms, as a maybe more tangible way of saying that. And it's just our job to continually recognize them. And it was like you said at the very beginning, like seeing the programs laid out in these flavors helped you see something that was occurring in yourself, helped you recognize something unconscious occurring, right?
Mm.
And then when you can make that conscious, that's when you can, go through a process to alchemize it and see through it and see through the illusion of it and come back into your heart so that you can go forth from your power and not from your conditioning, because all of our conditioning limits us. Conditioning just limits us.
Yeah, I've always said like awareness is the gateway to your transformation. Like once you see it, it's like you can see it and you can start to move through it. And I love what you shared about the ego because there's so much crap around like transcending, like killing the ego off, death of the ego. But it's for me, it was always like, how do I embrace all of myself? How do I integrate all of myself rather than thinking I've got to get rid of this and I've got to get rid of that. And even with these programs, now I've got to get rid of this program and that program.
Yes.
It's like, can we actually just embrace it and love it and see that these protective mechanisms are actually just an indicator of how precious you are? There's part of you that knows how precious you are that I'm going to protect the fuck out of you. So it's like, if we can actually meet it with more compassion and see it for what it really is and like, oh, is this the absolute truth, or is this something that I actually learned? Is this still serving me, or is it actually creating more harm? And actually just meeting it with that curiosity rather than this kind of force and this attachment of this is bad and this is wrong, because it's just another conditioning thinking that these programs are wrong.
Yeah, and like you said a couple of times, I think, like, and thinking that you need to fix yourself, thinking that there's something wrong about you, it just puts you back into the loop you're trying to get out of, and the truth is that you are whole and complete as you are right now. You are whole and complete with an ego, and I really agree. Like I see this quite a lot when I work with people. People can have this tendency to want to be like, oh, the ego's bad. I need to get rid of this part. Even if they're doing my work and they know they're not trying to get rid of the part of themselves, they're just changing their focus and changing, what part of themselves they live out of and occupy and they give the energy and attention to. There's still this like, oh, I know I need to get rid of that. And you're not going to get rid of that. But what you can do through embracing, having the awareness, embracing, alchemizing, is you can be less and less unconsciously subject to it,
Mm.
and so you don't live out of it, but it'll still be there. And the more that you make big, bold actions in your life and really go for the truth of who you are, it'll get triggered again. It
Mm.
it will. Um, it will get triggered again. So what, the kind of pitfall when people want to get rid of this part of themselves is it gets triggered again. Maybe they feel really unworthy or they go back into some pattern, they do something and they're like, "Oh my God, I've still got this. I'm so wrong and bad and fucked up and like here I am and everyone else is perfect and they're all getting it and they're all getting away from this thing and I'm not." And then where do you think you go from there? Right? Like you just go back into whatever your coping mechanism is to shrink and contract and assume the old identity, assume that identity of the
Yeah.
ego, rather than being able to go, you know what, here it is coming up again. I feel
Hi.
terribly unworthy. Hi, like, welcome, nice to see you again. Like, great. This is what you want. Oh, you want to tell me all this stuff is what's happening and all this stuff about me and this is what I should do about it. Okay, cool. Like, great. Thanks. Like, I don't live my life by that anymore, but
Mm.
that's cool. You're allowed to be here. I can love you, and when you can, like you're saying, when you can actually embrace it and love it and bring it in, you let yourself occupy your wholeness. When it's something you need to get rid of, you separate yourself from your sense of wholeness. And like your power is coming from occupying the truth of your wholeness. So when you can be with it all and embrace it all, you claim your wholeness.
Mm. That quote or that saying was coming to me of like how energy can't be destroyed, it can only be transformed. And so it's like when we're trying to get rid of something, it's like we're trying to destroy energy, which is actually impossible. It's only going to be transformed. And as we transform our relationship to the energy, it stops having all this power over us, and we actually just learn how to coexist and live with it and actually revel in it and find pleasure in it. And then it's not actually this kind of thing that now has all this power over you and dictates how you show up. It's just like, oh, hello. And I would always invite my clients into a fun practice with this of like, give them a seat at the table, invite them to your Mad Hatter tea party, give them a funny hat and some tea, and just welcome to them to the table. And when you actually give them the space to be seen, to be heard, to be felt, acknowledged, it quietens. It's when you're actually trying to avoid it and shut it up that it gets louder and louder and louder.
Yeah, because it's like, imagine your ego's job is to look for danger, look for threats, anything that's going to threaten your survival. And in our current day and age, that's at large psychological things, right? A person that's got more powerful energy than me, or like someone that's going to reject me or whatever. And so it's scanning for threats. And then it finds a threat and it's like, red alert, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. Like this is all going to fall to pieces because you're not good enough. And then if you're like, just fuck off, like go away. Don't want you. It's like, no, you need to know you're not good enough. It's going to shout louder and louder and louder. But if you can go, okay, cool, thank you, and hear it and allow it, and allow even the possibility of the fear that it's trying to voice to you, and go, okay, yeah, all right, maybe this whole thing does fall to the ground. Like, all right, cool, then it's done its job. Like it's told you but if you don't let that happen, it's gonna keep trying to like communicate with you because it's the guard, it's the watchdog, and it's trying to get this message across. So yeah, I love that analogy of like bringing it to the table, letting it have a voice, bringing it along with you. Because when the only reason we reject things and we want to get rid of them is because we fear that they have, or we think or fear that it has more power than we do. So we're like, I have to get rid of that because it's got more power than me and it's going to fuck me up, right? And so the message that your subconscious actually gets then is that that has the power and
Mm.
that's more powerful than you. And ultimately, to be ultimately powerful, and powerful people can be with anything, any like disaster happening, this part of yourself that seems threatening to your ego. If you can be with that and be like, cool, yeah, you can come in, like you can be at the table, you get a seat at the table, then what you do is you go, yeah, this is allowed to be here, and I'm I'm more powerful than that. I don't have to reject that because I'm afraid it's got more power than me. And that actually tells your subconscious that you've got the power. You're the predominant creative force.
Yeah. I wonder if you can speak to as well. Like, I know there's so much stuff around, like, when it comes to manifestation, good vibe, high vibe all the time. And there's like this fear to feel quote unquote bad or negative things because I'm going to get stuck in that and create things I don't want. And there's so much fear that we just resist it and push it away. High vibe, love and light.
Oh my God, totally. I remember having a woman in a workshop of mine 4 or 5 years ago, and it was a short, like in-person workshop, and we were doing an embodied kind of alchemical process using pleasure. And so one of the steps in it was for people to find a contraction within themselves and fully experience it and embody it. And I remember what she shared afterwards was like, wow, that was so liberating because I thought I had to be, completely vigilant to not think anything negative, not go to the negative, just be purely positive. And it's totally this brainwashing. I had another client actually. It was really funny, who came onto a session with me and she was trying to tell me what had been going on, and she didn't want to say the negative thing. So she said it in reverse in the positive, and then she told me it's the opposite of that. Because she didn't want to say these words she thought was negative. And, the thing is, your subconscious is looking at what has the power, not what yourself, like your focus creates your reality, but that's not, your focus is not the words you're saying, or the picture that you're visually holding in your mind. It's where are you coming from? Where are
Mm.
you coming from? So if you're like beating your head against the wall and saying like, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, because you feel so financially scarce, and that's what you want to resolve, that your subconscious is getting the message you're financially scarce. That's because that's actually where you're coming from. It's not like what's on the surface of the words you said, the surface of the picture you're seeing in your mind. It's like what is underneath it. That's the energy that's actually behind it. Is the energy behind it that of scarcity and fear and lack, or is the energy behind it that of your wholeness and your oneness? And the most powerful thing I've found in manifesting is the truth, is that you be with the truth. And what actually manifests and creates is where the focus is in your subconscious. And the tension, everything that happens in the universe is as a result of tension. So air pressure, wind happens, air moves as a result of resolving tension. There's a low air pressure, a high air pressure, the tension resolves. That's how air moves. That's how, if I have a rubber band, like there's a tension. If I let go of it, that tension wants to resolve. An engine creates tension and that propels forward. Everything is tension. And that happens, that's on the level of our consciousness as well. If I ask you a question, you are compelled to answer me because I've set up a tension. So, everything happens through tension. So with with manifesting, what's actually like a more powerful way to come at it is the tension between where you are and where you want to be. Like that will compel you to your end result. The thing is that we have a competing tension, which is our ego. Our ego wants safety. Our ego wants to resolve our sense of like getting love, getting significance, getting security. So if you're in resolving that tension, if that's where your focus is, then you're just going to be in the loop of your beliefs. But if you're in your creative tension, then there's nothing, the most powerful thing is that you can be in the truth of where you want to be, your true vision, and the truth of where you are now, which might be quote unquote negative. You might be feeling really fucked up and like, no one loves you, no one wants you, no one's going to want your thing, it's not going to work out. As long as you're in the like that's the truth. And then you don't try to resolve that. Your ego wants to resolve all that shit. It's similar to what we've been talking about. You just embrace it and let it be there, and then go, and this is what I want and this is what I'm going for. And that, I find, that is the powerful way to manifest. And you've got to be in the truth. And all this positivity shit, it has people being in denial, and
Mm,
denial is not powerful. Like
mm,
what message is your subconscious getting if you're in denial? Like it's not powerful to be in denial.
mm.
That's that's as briefly as I could put it. I hope something
Yeah.
came across from that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, because I just know that as like a lot of my work, I'm like, we're going to embrace it all. Like we're here to embrace all of ourselves. It's not about getting rid of this or that. We're going to be here and we're going to love and embrace all of it. And I know that there's so much fear, and I've definitely experienced that myself, to embrace the parts that I thought was shameful, were wrong, that I would judge, that I hated. I was like, I don't want to embrace this because then I'll be it forever and I'll be stuck with this. And it's
Yeah.
like, so we just kind of push away. And so I feel like that was really supportive of just really acknowledging where you are and where you desire to be, and actually just allowing them to coexist and be here. Because, yeah, it is in that like avoidance that we're actually strengthening the thing. So,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
And liberating yourself from the thing is embracing it. It might seem counterintuitive, but like, I've been coaching for 10 years. I so passionately apply all of this stuff to myself in my own life, and I work with other people and I see their journey and their transformation. And you know what? I'm not sure if I've ever seen a major fucking breakthrough that actually really resulted in big change happening in someone's life without a coming to terms with the depths of a pain first,
Yeah.
because the things separating you from the things you want is um is your pain, is your wounding, is your conditioning. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a problem. You just go for it. Like that's the thing separating you. And so if you can get to the heart and the bottom of that, that's what liberates you. That is 100% where your power is. And to really have like big shifts in your life will come from wholeheartedly like reaching into and embracing those very things. It's the most powerful thing you can do. People, absolutely, you're so right. People fear doing that because they're afraid they'll become that. And then that's all they'll be. But it's actually the thing that will liberate you from that.
I have a couple stories that came through that I was working with a client and she showed up to the session and was still like kind of scattered because she just rushed home. She just like jumped on the computer and was just like here and her mind was racing and I'm inviting her to drop in. She's like, "Oh, but I can't get my mind to stop." I'm like, "Well, who said anything about getting your mind to stop? Let it be there, let it be busy and just let it think and do its thing." And as soon as she came into that acceptance and that welcoming, it was just it was gone. And it was just like, as soon as I would invite her into just being with the thing that's here, boom, it would shift. And then as you were continuing to speak on this, it reminded me of my recent birth. And I was at this, like, I was kind of at the midway point. I was like 5 centimeters dilated. I was like, this is just not going to happen. My first birth was quite traumatic with an emergency C-section. And I was like, I'm just going to have another C-section. And I was so upset with how the first one went, and I hadn't come into full acceptance of the unfolding of that. And I had so much shame. I felt like my body failed me. I felt like I failed my son. Like there was so much stuff that I hadn't come into full acceptance of. And in that moment, I was so exhausted. I was like, it was about the 24-hour mark on 3 hours sleep. And I was like, I'm done. I'm so done. And I got to this point where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to love this baby any less. I'm going to love this baby with everything. It's okay. And in that moment, I just came into full acceptance that I was going to transfer because I was planning to have a home birth. And I end up like, I'm going to transfer. I'm done. She's just going to have to come through C-section. And in that moment, I came into full acceptance of my first birth. And I just like, I felt this peace and this liberation. And I connected to the part of me that was like, yay, we don't have to give birth. I was like, oh, how interesting. There's part of me that's very relieved here that I don't have to go through the natural birth experience. I was like, ah, and I was like ready. And so we're transferring. And within the space of an hour, I was fully dilated and I was in transition. I was like, oh no. The baby's coming. And so I got the birth that I wanted. It was maybe not in the location I wanted it to be, but it was natural, no drugs. She came through. We're both happy and healthy. And it was in that moment of acceptance that I went from like, it took me 24 hours to get to 5 centimeters. I'm like, I can't go another 24 hours. My mind was like, I'm going to have to do the same amount of time it took me to get that first five in an hour. Boom.
That is such a powerful story. And, what really jumps out at me about that story is, you just let the energy move, right? While you're resisting something, energy's not flowing. And when you came into that full acceptance, it's like the energy literally in your body, because our consciousness in our body is like one connected thing. Um, it flowed. And yeah, I mean, what a powerful illustration of that. It is so powerful. And you've used the word quite a few times, alchemy and alchemical, which is what it really is. It's not just this kind of approach that we're talking about is not just a mental thought process. Like you're not just like you're actually shifting the energy, and that's this alchemy that shifts you into a new state. And from that new state, literally what you see is different. The energy in your system is flowing differently. What you're putting out is different. The ideas that will occur to you are different. Like it's it shifts you into a new, I mean, maybe this is a bit of a wishy-washy way of saying it, but it does shift you into a new reality in a way. It shifts you
Mm.
into a new state of being, and it's your state of being. Your state of being, okay, circling back to what you said before, your state of being is not based on how positive you're thinking, like how much you're regulating your thoughts, and like if you're thinking really positive, your state of being is something so much deeper than that. And to be in non-resistance and allowance, that doesn't mean not having an intention, not having a vision, not having an outcome, but to be in a state of non-resistance and allowance, that's your most powerful state of being. And you can
Okay.
feel shit in that.
Yeah.
You can feel terrible. You can be in so much pain, but you're in this really
Mm.
powerful state. And yeah, your story is an amazing, amazing illustration of that.
Thank you. Yeah, it reminds me of the iceberg theory of like the tip of the iceberg being the conscious
Yeah.
mind, and underneath is the subconscious, all the stuff that's actually driving the show. And it's like
Yes.
we're kind of like, think positive, think positive, think positive. We don't realize there's all this shit underneath that's just like not thinking positive and not in the energy of that. And I really loved that piece around like, where am I coming from with this? So if like my intention's $1 million or the orgasm or whatever it might be that you're looking to experience, where is that intention? Because if it's coming from like that lack and that scarcity and like this isn't possible for me, and we're avoiding feeling like just think positive, it's like it's just not going to actually manifest.
Yes. And you use the word intention, and you can even think of it that way. What is intention? What is like in tension here? Is my belief that I'm in scarcity in tension, or is my true vision of what I want to create and experience in life in
Yes, so
tension?
good.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. So I'm wondering as well, I'm actually feeling that I'll link your podcast episode so we don't have to go like super deep with all the programs and people can go and listen to that one. But I'm wondering if you've got some space just to kind of list out the different programs, and anything that else you want to share about those programs.
Yeah, totally. So there's 10 programs I think I mentioned that I've formulated under this good girl conditioning. The first one, oh, and before I share each is driven by something that you're validated for, and then if you don't line up with that, what are you judged or rejected for, which then sets up in your unconscious being compelled to do the thing you get validation for, because that's our ego is driven around validation. It wants validation. We want the thing we're validated for. We don't want to do the thing we have negative validation for. So I'll share for the first couple what those are, and then like for the first two, let's say, and then I'll just list the rest. And as you mentioned, I have a podcast episode where I've gone through all of them, and I've gone through what's the validation. It's an hour-long podcast, so if we did that here, it would be another hour. Um, so the programs are number one, that it's not safe to be sexual, attractive, or sexy. You know, you might kind of, one of them might hit on more for you, like it's being sexual, is it being attractive, is it being sexy, is it being all of them? And so this happens to be what we've spent a lot of this episode talking about. And this conditioning teaches you to suppress your natural sensuality, fearing judgment, objectification, and, quite possibly danger from that. So in this program, we are validated for modesty, downplaying attractiveness, even being low maintenance, and there's an emphasis on intelligence and hard work. And in this program, we are judged for embracing sexuality, dressing provocatively, being too confident in your appearance. And we learn that sexuality and sensuality invites judgment and unwanted attention and is unsafe, or that you're like doing something bad and, unholy, impure
Mm.
for for embracing those things.
Yeah, it makes me think
Really
of
hard.
emasculation as well, of like emasculating to disempower men or whatever, and like bringing them down so that we feel more powerful, so that we feel like we're safer. A lot of Alison Armstrong's work around that, of like, yeah, just what I'm feeling and seeing in my body is like this hardening and like, yeah, just this hardness in the face, this tension. And when we're coming into more of like our sensuality and our sexuality, like there's that softness, there's that openness, which can often feel like really unsafe to be in, especially if we've not really allowed ourselves to ever be in that.
Totally. Yeah. Because, we perceive that there's potential danger in being in that. That was another point, actually. I'm not going to go into it because I realize we just want to get through these programs, but that you said earlier that I had wanted to speak to, which was now I'm losing it again. Um surrendering, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and surrendering and feel pleasure and not holding on to control. Like that wanting to control and this vulnerability and letting yourself be affected by someone, receive pleasure from someone, be in a surrendered state. So yeah, all of that relates to this. So the next program is the work hard slash it has to be hard program. I encounter this a lot. And this program says that success must come through struggle and sacrifice. Otherwise, you won't have success. Or if you have success, it's not real, it's a fluke, or it's not earned. You don't deserve it. How many people, and maybe you've done this a lot yourself, how many people have you spoken to where you might congratulate them on something and then they say, oh, well, I didn't really do anything, or like, oh, well, really, just happened because, they just can't even own it because it wasn't hard.
Mm.
And they did put
Yeah.
their blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Yeah, I noticed that even in relationships, like I've got to, and I've played this out a lot myself, like I've got to do so much in order to be deserving of having one thing done by my partner. So I've cleaned the whole house, I'm just asking you to do the dishes. Like I've done all of this, so now I
Yeah.
deserve this one little thing that you can support me with. But then behind that's all this like resentment because I've had to do all these things and you've just got one thing.
Yeah, totally, totally. Do you know something on my retreat as we were going through this one is uh, what a lot of women related to is like, because you can't be resting. Like in this program, you might think you want rest, you might think you want more spare time, but as soon as you get it, you feel really uncomfortable with it, like something's wrong, bad things are going to happen. And one of the things that a lot of women related to, which is something that used to happen for me at my parents' house, is that, I might be resting on the couch or just chilling or doing something. And as soon as you hear the door and someone's walked in, you jump up so fast and like pretend that you've been doing something, right? Like that is just so common. And that's because you believe you just got to be working, doing, struggling. It's got to be hard. It's got to come through sacrifice. So in this program, we're validated for sacrificing something, overworking, perseverance through struggle. That's what makes it really earned. And earning success through visible effort. And we're judged for resting, taking time off, asking for help, achieving success with minimal struggle. And you can even see that with how people judge other people they perceive have had it easy, or that have, when they really have no idea anyway, but that, oh, that was easy for that person, as if like they don't deserve it. I deserve more than that because I've worked harder, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I even noticed recently with like my son's birthday party, like feeling like I had to be doing something constantly. And yeah, just being really aware of like what in me is feeling like I can't actually just sit and enjoy the party now. It's happening, like just being in it. And again, like how we miss out on life. I'm blessed to have this wisdom and this ability to kind of become aware of that in the moment. But yeah, just getting really curious how this part of me was just like, I've got to just keep pottering. I'm just got to keep going and like
Mm.
missing out on being in the moment.
Mm, yeah, totally. It's a great example.
Mm.
So with the next ones, I'm just going to read through
Yeah.
them. And then anyone that's listening, if you want to hear a deeper dive, you can go to my podcast episode. That's the 10 Good Girl Conditioning Programs. So the next ones are that you get what you're given and you don't ask for more program. Being selfish or self-serving is bad. Not being allowed to be powerful, which in terms of like this one is so common in women. Almost all women I work with have this. And in terms of like a sensation, it's almost like this feeling that you're not old enough yet, you're a child. So that's this not allowed to be powerful program. If you're powerful, you'll be picked apart and torn to shreds by people. Your value is determined by how you look, your beauty, or your weight. It's bad to seek/attract attention. The who do you think you are program. And then the last one is that femininity isn't valid. And, specifically like beauty, fashion, caring about beauty and adorning yourself, spirituality, creativity, pleasure. Like, there's some of these feminine aspects that's like, those aren't valid. That's not valid and viable.
Yeah, thank you so much. I highly recommend for anyone that's resonating with this episode to go and check that episode out. It's yeah, really incredible. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I'd love to know if you wanted to share just how people can find you and like what's happening in your world, like what's going on for you. What have you got on offer at the moment? Or yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so anyone that would love to connect with me, I'm mostly in terms of social media, I'm mostly on Instagram. My handle is at alexh.co. And I also have a podcast, as we've mentioned a couple of times, which is called Money, Sex, Business, and Awakening. And what I have going on at the moment, I'm actually doing a bit of new offers and new structures in my business, which is very exciting. And one of the very exciting things that's almost ready, it might be ready by the time this podcast goes live, is this sex magic ritual system that I've put together. That's going to be, it's only going to be $14.40 for you to actually come in and start experiencing some of, what we've been talking about, or I've been talking about, but it seems like we have a very similar approach around sexuality. So typically I used to run a membership where we did a sex magic ritual once a month. And then there's also training around pleasure and connecting with your sexual energy and channeling it. And I previously always had that available in a collection that was $997. And I've just been formulating, that into a package that people can, I really want women to try this and experience this. So that's called the Sex Magic Ritual. That's going to be available very soon. And yeah, as I said, like I'm just making it super low cost, super accessible for women to get started with this. And then I have a couple of other courses that I run. So one is Money Queen, and that's this full system that's around looking at your relationship to money and then also practically, creating money management systems that align with what your goals are, what your vision is, what your values are, so that you can have practical tools that enable you to put into action the mindset shifts that you're having essentially around money. And then the other thing that I'm working on at the moment is that I'm creating actually a 12-month curriculum that will be broken up into shorter courses to teach this modality that I use in my work, this alchemy creative orientation modality that also brings in the pleasure and turn on work essentially for women. So that's something that I'm going to be starting probably in about February, March next year. So February, March of 2025.
Oh,
So if you're interested in any of those things,
mm.
you can head over to my Instagram and also my website, which is themodernwoman.academy. And all of the information will be on there. And if you can't find what you're looking for based on what I've said, just send me a message or send us an email, and I will be able to connect you with whatever it is that you would love to connect with.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting. Um, yeah, highly recommend going and following Alex on Instagram. Her podcast is amazing, like I've mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there any kind of final words, anything else that you want to share before we close off?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's been a really pleasure to come on and share this and have this conversation with you. And I guess my final words would just be, a kind of wrap up of what we've shared, which is that, for anyone listening, like it's all within you. It's all within you right now. And you have it. You have the power. And your power is in being able to, you know, embrace everything like we've spoken about and choose what you would really love from your heart. And that's just what it's all about. And you're not behind, you're not messing things up. There's nothing wrong, like you, wherever you are right now is the perfect spot for your next step. And that's it.
Yeah, and from that place, I feel like you can start to really tune into what is that next step rather than like, what have I got to do to get away from this thing? You can really
Totally.
just tune in. Okay, I'm not like this, it's not wrong where I am. There's nowhere else that I should be. Right here is the perfect place that to be to discover my next step.
Yes, totally. Very well
Yeah.
said.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll pop all your links below as well, so it's easy to find, so you can't get lost. But of course, reach out if there are any questions that you guys have. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Monique.